So, welcome to the D.tec International Drugs and Alcohol Roundtable 2020.
I'm Nicola Green. I'm Strategic Development and Marketing at D.tec.
So, obviously, I'm Daniel Jones. I am the UK Workplace Training Manager, so I look after the training operation within D.tec.
Yes, I'm Paul Mountford. I work for Merseyside Police. I've been there for 34 years. I'm currently based within the Road Safety Partnership as a casualty reduction officer, and I'm also the Force's drink and drug drive lead, which I've been for about a decade now, I guess. So that's me.
Yeah, hi everyone, Andy Wheeler. I'm head of technical delivery at D.tec Group.
Hi, I'm Simon Turner, and I'm the campaign manager for the government-backed Highways England Driving for Better Business campaign, which is its aim is to raise awareness of various work-related road risk issues. I'm also the chairman of the Association for Road Risk Management, and I sit on the PAC's working group for road user behaviour.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chris Seaton. I'm head of public affairs and policy for the Road Haulage Association, which is a trade organisation which represents 7,000 operators in the UK of commercial vehicles.
My name is Paul Harvey, so I'm one of the health and safety managers at British Sugar.
I'm Jill Milner, technical account manager for casualty at Aviva. I've been working in motorist management for quite a few years now, and what we do at Aviva is how we can work effectively with our clients to try and improve their risk and try and reduce those road traffic collisions on the road. Working very closely with them as well. D.tec are one of our specialist partners, which we introduce to our clients.
Hi, my name is Chris Price. I'm the head of occupational health for Muller UK and Ireland.
Hello again. So my introduction, yes, I'm the managing director. D.tec is more focused on road safety and specifically drink and drugs. The focus originally was on drink with some emerging drugs, but the world, and more specifically the UK, has changed quite significantly, and the availability, both in the availability and significantly in society's attitudes to both drink and drugs. On the roads, this acceptance is 5 deaths a day, each and every day. That's nearly 1,800 deaths a year, and it just seems to be accepted. If we put this figure in context, it's double the deaths from both murders and terrorism added together in the UK. So on top of that, we also have what are called seriously injured, 25,000 people with life-changing injuries. That's the definition of serious. Back to today's main focus, workplace safety, and for some that is specifically driver safety. Catching drink and drug drivers in your workforce is not a slight on your company. In fact, it's exactly the reverse. Not catching drink and drug drivers is the failing of a company. And worse still, it opens us ourselves as directors to both criminal and civil prosecution, with severe outcomes for managers, directors, and the company itself. Recent police figures show that drug driving has increased 3 times that of drink driving. What's the impact of this on your workplace?
Only a third of those drivers were unemployed. All the rest were in employment or professions, if you like. And there were a lot of professional drivers, HGV drivers, couriers, dispatch, taxi drivers. The other thing that's standing out for me when I look at arrests, we always record occupations. You can see those trades that feature quite a lot. And the fact that 9 times out of 10, they're driving a works vehicle like a van.
That was that figure of 28% of drug drivers and 13% of drink drivers, 17 to 25. It just shows that the younger ones, the focus on the drugs. It then went to 50-50-ish, 26 to 40 onwards. Now, I read into that the above data shows the higher percentage in the youngers, but I'm asking myself, is this a problem in the workplace as the older generation are more used to just alcohol, and yet we're the decision makers? That's an issue I come across, that really, the older we get, I'm probably the oldest in the room, the less we know about what's happening down at the ground.
And like I say, despite the lockdown, where fewer people should be driving and moving around, we have seen this sharp increase. In the last 2 months in particular, over 500 drivers in 2 months. You think 6 years ago we had 125 in 12 months. That's just in half the time. So it's a really shocking stat.
Then, of course, they go to university and they come out in their early mid-20s and come into the workplace. And, you know, universities aren't known for their clean and healthy living regimes. So we've got a whole sort of cohort of young people coming into the workplace in the position where, you know, for over half of their lifetimes, drug use has been a kind of an accepted activity within their peer group. So I think employers have got to really get on top of this issue and understand it, because, you know, it was a complete shock to me when I started seeing these types of figures that I just didn't realise it was that big a problem.
I think this has come down to the crux of the problem. It's the whole difference in age groups, in culture, in terms of generations, the younger people, which you quite rightly say. It's common practice now to use these drugs, and those decision makers, a lot older, probably our age, aren't aware of the problem. Many businesses, they just perceive they don't have a problem because they haven't looked under the surface. But it's all there just bubbling away, waiting for a serious incident to happen and to bring those companies into serious brand reputational damage if they're a wholesale brand around the country. So, yeah, it's a growing issue. It's something I'm concerned about.
Government are working hard to increase the number of young people joining the industry. They're offering lots of different avenues of funding and apprenticeships and things to get younger people into the industry. So that may well exacerbate the problem within our sector.
What I'm going to talk about now, I hope you're not all fatigued on the point, but it is the sort of legacy of COVID-19 in the industry. I don't think anyone would be surprised to hear that the supply chain was put under significant pressure at the peak of the pandemic. Obviously, this could have had a potential impact on employee mental health, particularly driver mental health. And the media has reported increased alcohol consumption. And I think it's safe to say, looking at the arrest figures just for Merseyside as an example in Essex, it could suggest increased drug use. So do we feel this has had a detrimental effect in the workplace?
What we're now seeing is, strangely, those that stayed in work to produce the food, they're the ones that are coming down with the anxiety.
Do you think that's pressure related with regards to, I suppose, the needs of society during lockdown, in particular in manufacture of food and milk, etc. for yourselves? Do you think that the pressures on the employees and drivers for getting products from A to B, that's why we're seeing this anxiety issue? And I suppose the angle we're coming at it from is, do we think that maybe people might have taken stimulants more or drank more to deal with those pressures?
Yeah, I would have to say I'd agree that a lot of people have self-medicated. Just looking at the figures of how much alcohol has been sold through the period by the supermarkets, that itself tells its story, doesn't it?
I wonder whether this will exacerbate drug abuse and whether people are now coming out of lockdown, or rather have worked through lockdown to support the supply chain and may have a bigger drug problem than they had before. So I think one of the stats that Ian had pulled out for me, the European Monitoring Centre for Drink and Drug Abuse, they say that those that do take drugs and drink are doing it more so.
And you mentioned essential supply chains early on, which was you know, one of the big ones. But I think it's also linked to fatigue here as much as mental health, because specifically with those, there was they were operating way in excess of their sort of capabilities and initial capacity to start with. Massive recruitment drives going on. Those recruitment drives are largely still going on because they're still short-staffed, and so I think there's a potential risk of drivers in those sectors taking stimulants to keep them going, as Paul mentioned in his original presentation. he mentioned taxi drivers. They obviously do very, very long shifts, and it's kind of, you know, known about that they take stimulants to keep them going. And I think there's a risk of that in these other industries. But from a mental health point of view, obviously, you know, people who've been furloughed have got various anxieties. We know alcohol sales are up, and you know, you mentioned that sort of alcohol use and drug use was up too. So all of these people who've been furloughed at home for the last few months, they're now coming back into the workforce. So have they got used to, you know, it may be that they had occasional use at the weekends, and it maybe wasn't enough to make them question their ability to perform at work, but now they might have got used to taking a great deal more because they didn't have any other obligations. So they're now coming back into the workforce.
What is the protection offered to a corporation, its directors and its senior managers from a robust and, most importantly, an active drug and alcohol policy?
Assure you that your drivers are fit to be on the road. Many police forces are now catching more drug drivers than drink drivers. Drugs, alcohol and some prescription medications will limit drivers' judgment and reaction times, increasing the chance that they'll be involved in a serious crash. Road crashes have devastating consequences for people who are injured, for families who are bereaved, and for staff and your business. If your driver was drinking alcohol or taking drugs, they could lose their license and face jail time, with much more severe penalties if someone was killed. As their manager, you could be held personally liable and face a jail sentence. Your company faces reputational damage and an unlimited fine. To avoid this, it's vital you have an up-to-date and robust drug and alcohol policy that commits you to carrying out screening tests randomly after a crash and when you recruit new drivers. A simple breath test, saliva sample and skin wipe gives results in minutes and proves you are a responsible manager by making sure your drivers are safe and legal.
So, how do you in your workplace decide what will be enough to satisfy a judge at a corporate manslaughter case?
Because the policy has to be living and breathing and has to be effective. Otherwise, it's just not worth the paper it's written on.
The larger companies have much more robust processes in place, and I guess take more seriously drugs and alcohol policies and making sure they're implemented and effectively used.
To do. And our whole philosophy is prevention first. And if you can prevent it in the first place and identify and support your employees through this, it is definitely the way to go. We are seeing it's more on the agenda. We did a webinar last week actually for brokers and for our clients, and we used the same stats you've just used for Essex Police, which were on your website. And the amount of feedback we got from people who said, were those figures actually correct? Or did you make it up? And we went, no, we didn't make it up at all.
Sometimes that's exactly the scenario, is that there's been a policy there and there's a little bit of a tweak, but it's not worth doing. A little bit of a tweak, not worth doing. 10 years on, and society has changed, we need to say, now's the time that it needs a review, not just a tweak. And that's our day job. We've got that information. We can keep you focused on the key things to consider and help you through that.
How should a company decide on what is an effective random testing rate? So, as Ian just said, we've got policy, educate, deter, detect. So here at D.tec, we have a fully encompassing solution that works off that model of policy, educate, deter, detect. Each part has a significant role to play within an effective anti-drug and alcohol solution. So obviously, first and foremost, which we kind of touched on very briefly, is the policy. So it's obviously there to inform your employees that these are the rules of your workplace. Then we move on to education. So obviously, this is where we communicate with staff to help them understand why the company have these rules in the first place. And then we move on to obviously the deterrent. So the deterrent is the company's disciplinary policy and the consequences that any employee will face for breaking the rules. And then finally, we have the last piece of the puzzle, which is obviously detection. So we're strong believers that it's not about catching people. We're there to protect the innocent majority and highlight the not so innocent minority to provide a safe workplace. So detection is about monitoring if your education and deterrent is successful and sufficient in the first place, regardless of what you've kind of done previously or what you're currently doing within your organisations. How often in years would you wish to have your employee randomly screened? So
I suppose it's a hard one to answer. I don't know. I suppose it can depending also on their role, and I suppose what the numbers telling us. I mean, when I see some of these scary numbers now, and I'm thinking, you know, is it something we should be doing annually?
I'd say at least twice a year.
Twice a year, okay.
And like we've mentioned, it's not catching people out. It's actually, you know, you can even class as supporting people, but also, you know, protecting people. You know, not only in our business, but you know, for people out on the roads and families of people. So
just thinking, one thing we've done before with directors is actually do a mock trial and actually do it where there has been a road traffic collision and it was a positive drug test done, and bringing that into play and using the police, you know, doing that whole role play, and for the management team to actually see it. It's used in lots of other ways, but it has been used very successfully.
It is, yeah. We run a lot of mock, we run one a year mock trials.
Yeah.
We have a scheme called Mind Your Business with a local council, and we'll get a proper magistrate in, a proper barrister will come along, and we'll have police officer giving evidence, and we do different topics. Might be mobile phone, might be alcohol, might be drugs, it could be vehicle condition. There's a whole range of things that we cover.
We're protecting you, and we're protecting your employees and the public. Well, I hope you've found it useful. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Nick.
Ian.
Cheers.